Okay, we're going to call this meeting to order.
I was long.
And this is the October 25th meeting of the Board of Adjustment and Planning Commission. And we are being videotaped today. Are we going to be videotaped every meeting? Okay, great. Would you folks like to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your organization?
Oh, sure. I'm Alexandra Canane. This is Johnny. And what we're doing is we're from Friends of Portland, and we're videotaping all the different city government meetings and putting them up on the web just to get the people in the community more involved in what's going on.
Okay, very good. Well, you're welcome to be here today. We'll start with the approval of the minutes from our October 11th meeting. Do we have a chance to look at those? Do we have a motion to approve? Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Motion approved and seconded to approve our minutes of our October 11th meeting. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, this meeting was scheduled originally just to be a work session because we didn't think we had any business today. But we have a gentleman here named Mr. Tapia, and he wants to talk to us a little bit about his home occupation, a business that he wants to conduct. So we'll let him go first, and if you'd like to tell us a little bit about what you're doing, and go from there.
Basically, what I'm going to conduct out of my home business is importation of firearms and selling of firearms and setting up firearms for repair for clients. It's to be by appointment only, so the volume of traffic will be limited, and if I do become overwhelmed with traffic, I have plenty of parking on my property to accommodate without interference of regular traffic on the street on Obisu.
Okay, and your home is at 512 Obisu?
That's correct.
Okay. Inspector Vanderpool, have you got a chance to visit with Mr. Tapia?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, we've talked briefly about this. I wasn't aware that he was going to bring that in today. I mean, there is the questionnaire that he has to fill out. He has to, in writing, give us that information as to meet the requirements for a home occupation. I don't have that yet. I just reviewed his plan, and by the square footages denoted there, he does meet the 25% maximum, so he's underneath that, well underneath that for that part of it. Previously, last month, 2 months ago, we had an individual come in and ask to do the same thing. The board, he submitted that information, the parking and all those things. He had that information lined out for you. And he also had been in contact with alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. And if I remember correctly, you approved that contingent on the building department hearing from them and saying that everything was okay, his licensing and all that stuff was in place. I guess, Mr. Chairman, it's your discretion, but I would recommend that you would allow this to happen as long as we receive in writing those criteria that in writing criteria that he has to meet for home occupation, so it would be part of the file.
Okay.
And until then, he could not do that.
Okay. One of the concerns was, I know one of the questions was about inventory. Are you going to carry any inventory at all?
No, it'll just be customer will come in, order what he wants, and then when he comes in, it'll be given to the customer immediately. So inventory in hand, I will not keep a stock, but I do have a 20 gun safe cabinet that's fire rated for 45 minutes in case I do have to hold on to the firearm. That's where it's going to be secured at
Until it was picked up.
until it's picked up.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
I was wondering whether this really should not be advertised, be brought before the Board of Planning and Adjustment, simply because there might be people in the neighbors in the area that might want to come and express their views about this.
Yeah, what's
Requirements?
yeah, what are the requirements?
Necessary conditions, home occupations, or permitted accessory uses in residential districts only so long as all of the following conditions are observed. A, Such occupation shall be conducted solely by the resident occupants in their residence. No more than one room, 25% of the gross area of one floor of said residence. Accessory building, whichever is less, shall be used for the purposes. C, no use shall require internal or external alterations or involve construction features or the use of electrical or mechanical equipment that would change the fire rating of the structure or the fire district in which the structure is located. D, there shall be no outside storage of any kind related to the home occupation. E, the use may increase vehicular traffic flow and parking by no more than one additional vehicle at a time. And F is no use shall create noise, dust, vibration, smell, smoke, glare, electrical interference, fire hazard, or any other hazard or nuisance to a greater or more frequent extent than usually experienced in an average residential occupancy in the district in question under normal circumstances wherein no home occupation exists. He is in an R1 district.
There's no requirement for notifying the public.
There is not.
Any other questions? Sure. Okay. We have a motion. The motion would be contingent upon the submission of the proper paperwork, the approvals from
The ATM.
the ATM. So, anyone want to make that motion, or do you want to approve it?
I'll move that we approve it with those conditions being met that you just reiterated.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Motion carried. If you'll get us that information to Mr. Vanderpool, go ahead and give you the proper paperwork from us for the approval. I think that's all we need then for now.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, is there a place for you to sign that?
See one. Oh, on this one, yes. Okay. Okay, I'm going to give this back to Kathy. Okay, as I was saying, this was originally scheduled for a work session. We wanted to talk about the committee that we're going to be putting together for our strategic plan. And we just thought it would also be good to talk a little bit about the timeline that we're going to have, putting this all into effect. So with that, I think I'll ask Mr. Vanderpool.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
do you want to go ahead and set that date for that second November meeting before we start that?
For our next
Our
meeting?
second meeting in November falls on Thanksgiving,
Oh,
and we
okay.
typically move that back to Tuesday.
Okay, now we got November 8th in the agenda. Is that the date? that
No,
we
it's
set?
Thanksgiving, the 22nd.
Oh, okay.
We would be meeting that date, that's Thanksgiving. We typically move that date back to Tuesday of that same week.
What is that date?
If that works for you, I mean, if that works for everybody.
Yeah, well,
That's 20,
go ahead.
20.
22nd.
Oh, no, Tuesday's the 20th, yeah.
All right. Do we need a motion for that? Or just consensus? Okay, we'll propose that we move the next meeting to November 20th so that we can accommodate for Thanksgiving.
Unless you want to come down here on Thanksgiving.
Eat turkey. If it's not necessary to have a motion on that, will everybody approve that then? So if we approve that, okay, we'll go ahead and reschedule that then for November 20th. Sarah, you make that up. Okay. All right, then, so, Inspector Vanderpool, if you could talk to us a little bit about the timeline for the master plan, and then we'll get into talking about the,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have scheduled, and and it should be in the local newspaper, I believe, Friday or Saturday. Our public notification that we'll be conducting a public hearing at the council meeting during the regular time of the council meeting. That would be November 5th, 2012. We are anticipating submitting to council immediately following that the resolution that is required by the grant application that the city would pass, and that'd be the next step. Then we intend to have the grant application to our district supervisor for the Wyoming Business Council, which is Leah Brusino, by the 3rd of December. Just so you know, the deadline for that application is January 15th, so that's plenty enough time in advance for Leah to look it over, go through anything, find any information missing, give us some pointers, get it back to us, we can get it adjusted and get it submitted in a timely fashion. And that's typical procedure. And we have set the proposed budget after researching several other communities, what they've invested, what they've got out of their investment at $45,000 maximum, which the city would be required to have a 20% match, and that would be included in that total. So the total would be $45,000. Our percentage would be 20% of that. And just to mention and applaud the Washakie Development Association, they have already donated $2,500 towards that match that the city has to do.
Okay. All right, and then after we get moving on this, we'll be putting together a more detailed timeline showing all major and minor steps and going through the planning process.
Mr. Chairman, that is what I anticipate and would strongly recommend, is that we have an itemized, detailed chronological order graph set up showing exactly where we're supposed to be at, when we're supposed to be there. I think the planner that we intend to hire, the consultant, will help us with that. Their team, I don't know, one, however many we end up with, will help us get that set up a little bit better as far as what our timelines will be. We have to give in the application, we have to give our basic timelines. They require 5 different items in there to be identified: when we plan to go out for the RFP, when we plan to hire a consultant, how long it's going to take us to develop the plan, when the final submission is going to be. Those things they need to know, just so they know we're not going to stretch this out over a 10-year period. But the fine details of that, I really strongly encourage that we incorporate the common sense approach that a planner would put into that, or our consultant would do. You know, their expertise and knowing exactly what should come first, keep us from stumbling too many times. But those chronological timelines of the events that need to occur is typical for all major businesses, very typical for construction firms, detailing when, where they're going to be. And in my experience with the other master plans I've been involved in, that has been something that has been done.
Would we develop that in conjunction with the consultant that would be hired?
I strongly recommend we utilize their expertise for that. Yeah. It would be best for us to have a lot of things identified, but we're talking about our stakeholders. I think for the interviews there, we're going to have a bunch of information that we're going to be able to use to compile each different faction of that particular timeline, what areas are going to need more time and that stuff. But the planner's going to know which one needs more time, which one needs less time.
Okay, well, at our last meeting, we had a list of maybe 30 people that we had kind of developed, maybe more.
Yeah, maybe more.
You got it up there?
I don't know. Would you please kill the light on the right-hand side?
So what we want to do today is kind of decide on what the process is going to be to select the committee for the statement. Are we going to have interviews with 30 to 50 individuals, or are we going to, we could keep it just within our group here if we wanted to, or we could limit it to city employees, or we could do a lot of different things. Nobody has any idea yet what we want to do. So we thought we would bring it to the board for discussion. I think, as you know, if you get too large of a group, it gets to be unwieldy and difficult to handle. We're dealing with a volunteer committee, and so we want to be sure that whoever we pick people that are responsible and have some vested interest in the community, and people that would be responsible and to the extent that they would attend meetings and fulfill their assignments. So, with that,
Isn't there more to that?
Oh, yeah, that's,
now that we don't have them all on here, do we?
what's that?
Are all the names on here?
You know, we have not put anybody in, identified the Whirland staff that would be, who would be interviewed.
Right.
The, who on the tree board would be interviewed, who on the Chamber of Commerce would be interviewed. Whether it's all of those people, as you go down, Mr. Chairman, downtown businesses, are we gonna interview every downtown business? Are we gonna identify selects, you know, every A in the phone book, every D in the phone book, or, you know, I don't know how we would do that or how you would recommend doing that. But this is just the groups.
The group, yeah.
And also, Mr. Chairman, so I can speak towards that committee just real briefly. In my past experience, I've seen it done several different ways. The committees have comprised solely of the Planning Commission. Very typically, they do not conduct the master plan, the comprehensive plan discussions and that business at a regular meeting. So that means another meeting or two a month that they involve themselves into. I've seen planning commissions do it at their planning commission meeting. Smaller community, less things going on. I think they had time to involve it in that. I've seen communities take and identify specific individuals within the community that are forward-thinking, that have some professionalism behind them, whether it be in business or it be in engineering or architect or something like that, and form a team. And that team became an advisory team. They worked on the master plan, they worked hand in hand with the consultant, and they came with the consultant to the planning commission meeting for updates and approval for the next step. So there's several ways you can do this. It just depends upon how much time you want to invest, how much time you would like help from other people. I know that Washakie Development Association would love to be very intimate with this. It's very crucial to their business. I don't know if we want Washakie Development Association to be our sole interviewing committee, master plan committee, but maybe some members from that, maybe some members from the Chamber of Commerce, you know, just people in the community that are really concerned and have background in this type of thing.
Yeah, there is another way that we could let the company that we're contracting with take it down on the whole thing.
Most definitely, we could wait and stay idle until we actually hire a consultant and step from that point forward. If that is our intention, we probably might want to think about the budget a little bit.
Right. And that was
Because-
going to add that would cost more.
Yeah, the number we came up with our involvement first, taking care of a lot of that information. And also keep in mind that the one consultant that did come before council and talk about it thought the stakeholder interview prior to would help you itemize your RFP and be able to select a consultant that fits the community much better than just going out with a generic, we need a consultant to help us do a master comprehensive plan for the community, and not really having any specifics about the community.
The only reason I mentioned that is just so we'd have all the options to think about. So with that little bit of a background, what's everybody's thoughts as far as forming this committee?
Well, you know, that's why I was asking about that list. And I don't know how many people you're gonna pick off from that list, but it seemed to me like you could get out of hand fast.
Too many, yeah.
Option two. Say 3 of them at a time, or 4, and just interview them each time. It involves more meetings, I agree. But if you take 3 at a time, you won't have too much congestion. And you'll get more of a direct opinion because there's no everyone. And you can interview them, take their main points, and compile those and do the next 3 or 4, take their main points, compile them, and so forth. If you plan it out right, you can have it in comes with your deadlines you have laid out. But the first thing, I think, even before this, you need to lay out a deadline period of such and such has to be done by such and such a time and so forth, so you know how much time you've got in between each step.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question too. You, on your timeline there, how long do we have to form the committee and get the interviews done?
Mr. Chairman, as soon as I find my mouse again. I know that several communities have gone out in master plan development for their communities 2.5 to 3 years from the actual concept to the final plan being developed and presented to city council and approved and put in ordinance. I don't think, and I don't want to speak outside of my expertise, but I don't believe Wyoming Business Council likes to see it stretched out much further than that. Understanding that any government moves slowly, so when they're well aware of that. There is quarterly reporting and stuff you have to do along with this. I personally would like to see the plan fully operational in somewhere in 2014, preferably before the end of fiscal year 2014, 13, 14. So we're heading to, right now, you're looking at 1.5 years. That might be pushing it. I don't know. And that might be dependent upon all the items that we identified by interviewing these people where that's going to be. The actual timeline is going to bring up the application. What we have to identify in the application is, tell me if I go by it, Tracy. Oh, right there.
There you go.
There's what has to be identified. Notice they have 2 others. I don't believe you have to fill anything in there, but if you have intermediate parts in there that you want to break down, parts of the planning process, but we have to identify those dates on the application. And those have to be definitive. Now, if we need an extension, I believe Wyoming Business Council would be more than happy to work with us, provided we're following all the criteria. But they don't want any of that open-ended. They want to know for the application. So that, Garrett, that's what we have to identify, that part of it anyhow. The stuff that fits in between there,
Yeah.
especially in the planning process, we'd be grabbing at stars to even come up with something at that right now. I think we need to get a bunch of information before we could actually put any deadlines or definitive times on anything as part of the plan.
Generally speaking, we want to be ready with our committee interviews at least by the time the grant is approved. What you say?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think that we need to have our committee established sometime in January or February.
Okay.
We need to have identified whether that committee is going to be the committee that is going to oversee the development of the master plan, or is it just going to be an interview committee? Then we need, if it's just going to be the interview committee, then we need to figure out who's going to be the master plan, the comprehensive plan committee. I think that needs to be identified very shortly after that. And it can be the same. You know, the WDA is one of the ones on that list. You might be one of the people that would be interviewed as interviewing people from WDA, maybe not, but those type of things. You know, this group could do those interviews of those particular entities that we have up on that board. And maybe out of, this would probably be my recommendation, that this group, and it's a commitment. I mean, there's a lot of different meetings and interviews to do in that. Even if you group a bunch of people in a room and ask a bunch of things. And the more people, the less information you're going to get out. The more people will talk more candidly, the less it's that they're surrounded in a room. But if this group dedicated that time to those interviews, I think you could find your master plan committee out of those interviews.
Mr. Chairman, I would kind of prefer that we just leave the committee be comprised of the planning commission until such time as we get a consultant aboard, and then consult with the consultant on who he or she thinks we ought to have as on the committee. You know, he's the one that's going to be doing the vast majority of the work and more knowledge about who needs to be there than we have, I think, or should have.
And if we did that, that would put a pretty big load on us with regard to doing the interviews. That would put us doing the interviews.
For the consultant?
Yeah, because we have to gather up as much information ahead of time for the consultant so that we're not paying a horrendous amount of money for the consultant. So yeah, the idea is to make contact with as many people in the community as possible and get their input before he starts.
Actually, using that information, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, using that information to develop an RFP that is specific to our community, so we get the right consultant in here.
If we do that, that says that we will handle the entire interview process, which would be time consuming for us. I'm not that, I'm willing to do it. So, it would be good, but, so that would be one option. We've already got up here the areas of the community that we think need to be interviewed, and we could divide up that list. We could decide who from each area would be interviewed, and we could probably complete that in fairly quick time period. There is actually a worksheet, isn't there, for the interviews?
There is. City of Cody provided us with a basic, if I remember right, 10 questions, 9 questions, something like that they use just to stimulate discussion with those individuals. And then once those individuals actually started interacting back with the committee, the review committee or the interview committee, then they just let it go. They didn't go and make them answer the other 7 questions on there. Then they started listening and saying, ooh, this is important to these people. Ooh, this is, and there was somebody there, obviously, and I'm pointing over here, but there was somebody there taking notes, so all of this was identified. And then they compiled all that, and when it was all done, and more than one community has done this, but when it's all compiled and done, they looked at it, and there is all the items that are important to the community, what they call community values, they're all identified. Then now, you know what kind of planner you want. If the only community value was water and sewer, well, then you need a civil engineer involved in this. But if it's across economic development, it's across all the broad spectrum that you want an AICP. You know, somebody that understands planning and growth in a community and organized growth for a community instead of sprawl. But you'll be able to, in your RFP, when you write the RFP, the request for proposals, looking for a planner with expertise in, please submit your previous projects that have dealt with this, and this, and this. And you'll start narrowing that list down from just anybody that qualifies to be a consultant as far as Wyoming business companies.
So then one of the questions on the interview would be looking for volunteers to
The master plan committee or assignments to that. I didn't mention, but I have seen committees actually have a master plan committee that each one of those had an individual area: infrastructure, business, growth, zoning, and they spun off and had their own little committee that went out there and beat the pavement, knocked on doors, got some more information, brought that back. So there's another way you can do that too, without everybody taking on the full load. Everybody takes on smaller loads, and then you bring all that information into one room.
When do we think that the grant would be approved?
I believe May, wasn't it, Tracy, the funding would be allocated in there. I think we would know sometime shortly after January when And of course, I want everybody to keep in mind, this has a lot to do with how well the Wyoming Business Council is funded this year too. So they might not receive the allocations that they're anticipating, therefore our odds of receiving a grant are going to be a lot less.
So if the board were to conduct the interviews with these stakeholders up here, we would, after that, have to select a committee that would be the master plan committee. Is that correct?
Or decide to take that on yourself. I mean, yeah, you would need an interview committee to set that up. That interview committee could be the master plan committee, they could be a faction of the master plan committee, they could have nothing to do with the master plan committee, they could absolve afterwards.
Well, what I was getting at is, I don't think our group could put together interviews that were so concise that we would be able to develop the master plan from that, from those interviews. So I think if you've got worksheets, and if it's going to be us, let's say, to do those interviews, that would be the interview committee. And then from that, we would develop a master plan. Is that right?
Yep, and that's pretty much what I think Herm had. Then at that time, you'd have the information you need for the RFP. Then you get your consultant on board, and you go, okay, we've got this. Where do we go from here?
So now, we could gather enough, though, for the consultant to meet his requirements.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
And I think that would be the intention of the stakeholder interviews, is to, number one, to identify the specific values that the community has that are going to identify what type of consultant we need.
So, in addition to our group, would there be any other people that we would want to assist us at this time?
Obviously,
No.
her, are you considering her in our group?
Well, no, absolutely. But I'm thinking of someone like Dave, or you want someone from the city council, or
That, Mr. Chairman, that'd be entirely up to you. It's just, I think that's a big load. You know, you're going to take on a pretty intense commission, you know, by doing this. I don't know if you would want to take, hey, Herm, you've got the top 5. You and Keith got the top 5. Garrett and I had, you know, and then maybe Ron and Sarah and Tracy, you've got the next ones, and then we can do that. Or the whole 5 of you can sit down to each one of those groups and talk it through. I think it's all open. I mean, hence the brainstorm.
Well, we were talking earlier about the fact of combining some of those, like your schools and stuff like that, or your police, city people and stuff. If you start combining them and get a good conversation going between the groups, they're gonna hit off each other. You don't have to have a big group, you can have a small group at the same time. And you'll get more interaction if you have only about 2 or 3 that can, say, might back and forth a little bit, feed off each other. But all we're doing basically in this interview point is just getting information. Not,
No, we're not going to try to
not set it.
structure it or do anything.
No.
We're just gathering information. I'm wondering, Mr. Duffy, City Council, do you have any comments or thoughts on how we might conduct this interview process?
Well, I was just, I was thinking that you may, you're talking about how do you decide and who do you pick from different groups. I wondered if maybe you ask the group to pick. If you're going to talk to the medical community, then put it out there and say who among you would like to participate in that.
Okay.
As to whether or not you have a separate group from the EAPC to work on those interviews, I suppose you could, but I think it would be better to bring people in from outside of the, to get away from the city council and the government side and ask people from the community to participate with some or all of you in that committee rather than to draw the city council in. Just from the standpoint that you're going to be taking it back to the city council for discussion. think that it might be better to leave the council out of it at the, you know, in these early stages. But I see what Ron's saying. You do have lots of options, and it would be easy to wind up with too many people at a time. But
I think what Herm is saying is that we would just be the organizer of the initial interviews with the stakeholders. And we could go to the stakeholder. Can we run that up a little bit higher? So
You want to look at the more of the list?
yeah, I just want to, I just want to, yeah, just this is fine. Get back to right there. Let's just, okay, downtown businesses, for instance, we could go to the chamber and ask them for 3 people from the downtown business area that the downtown business could nominate, let's say, and they would be the people that we would interview. And our only purpose in that whole process is to follow the form, the interview form. It's not to influence it or do it any other way other than to try to stimulate conversation. After those folks are selected and we get all of their input, we would then, because that, what do you say, you got, how many on that list? Let's say 10 major areas in our community. And we get
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably 20, 25.
So if we get 3 from each area, you know, we would have 60 people that we would be talking to from major areas. Yes, there.
Well, my thought is kind of like Dave Duffy's also. I think that you need to narrow it down, but narrow it down like, let's suppose Chief Coker with the fire department.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks to all his people at the fire department and then comes to you with their thoughts and ideas.
Yeah.
WDA, the same thing. If you get 2 or 3 people from each organization, pretty soon you're going to have a house full and you're not going to get anything done.
Yeah, we wouldn't
but yet
have-
this way, everybody would have a voice through their representative, just one person. But I don't think you need all of these entities. I think you can pick and choose from those.
Well, yeah, that's the idea, is to get 3 people from each entity, but not have them all in the same room. If we were going to conduct the meetings, if you will, we would conduct them separately and at different schedules.
I understand that.
And like Garrett says, we would have 3 or 4 in a meeting. So it wouldn't be cumbersome.
3 or 4 entities or 3 or 4 people from one entity? So
It could be one or yeah, we could interview 1 or 2 of those major groups. We could have like maybe 9 in a meeting.
But if they had the information that those folks in their area want to cover, one person should be able to represent them. Do you see what I'm saying? That's just my thought.
And I don't have any preference. Personally, I'm not trying to, say one way or the other, but I think it's better in the beginning that we have a large sampling and then condense it down.
Ron, do you happen to have a copy of that?
Worksheet?
Of the-
The questions?
Yes.
I thought I had it on here, but this obviously isn't the computer I have it on. If you excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I'm a little
Kind of curious, how many questions we're going to be asking. Well, you kind of, it did seem to be like Dave, Craig was saying, let those people ask their employees or their people, their proteges with the more important questions, and we just ask a broad questions.
We could provide the list to the people that we're going to interview ahead of time.
Of what they need to ask.
And they could then talk to their employees or their constituents and then come to the meeting prepared to
Yeah.
answer questions.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
hoping with that.
Very good way to go.
We talked originally about putting a mailer out at one time. It would be the same thing if we did that and sent that to like the VA or the fire department or something, certain grouping of questions, and have them go around, do their, that'd be okay too, because they can come back.
That would work fine. The whole idea would be to get the information out there, let them research it, and then we would have our meeting with them and then,
Well, good points.
Yeah.
And whatnot.
well, we
Stack
combine
it
all
out.
the points
Well,
and, just compile them. And then leave that to just the information for the contractor to use.
I'm not going here, I think it'd be better if we started out as a group here.
Yeah.
And then, if, after we get the contracts going out.
While we're waiting for Ron, Chris, I think you're one of those groups up there. I don't see it on that right there. But how would you feel about how to handle that?
Very flexible, we can work with you however you
Sure.
choose to move forward.
Yeah. But you would definitely have input because they're intimately interested in how the city runs.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. How about you, Dave?
Me?
Got any ideas?
I like the idea of handing it out beforehand so
Yeah.
that they can come prepared, and if they've got people in their organization they want to talk to, so they're not showing up not knowing what to expect. They'll come with thoughts in mind and from whoever they want to get ideas from.
So we would compose a letter explaining what it is we're trying to do. Send it out to each one of these major areas and then request from them 3 representatives that would survey their area and complete the worksheet and be prepared to discuss it at a meeting at some future date.
Yeah, it's a good way
I think that would
to, way
work.
to get started.
By the way, Dave, congratulations.
Thanks.
Yes, I agree.
So there are only 9 questions?
Yeah, and,
Somebody wants to hand those out?
No, 1 week?
Well, here, give me some, I'll just pass them around this way here. Yeah. Go around that way. All right. Get some to the people in the audience also. Okay, basically, these are the questions. In other words, once we've selected these 3 groups, or each group has selected 3 individuals, those 3 individuals would then complete this form by contacting people in their area, their department, and get answers to these questions. What amenities do you value most in Cody? What new amenities do you want to see in the future? What are the key areas within the city that need additional attention in the master plan update? In other words, downtown gateways, new industries and jobs. What new industries and jobs should the community focus on? How can the community best support existing businesses? What are the 3 objectives you would like to accomplish for the master plan update? What is the desired character or vision for the community you would like the plan to achieve? Provide several realistic tools and recommendations that would would preserve the character or vision you desire. A successful plan is one that finish the sentence there. So basically, those are the 9 questions that we would ask the 3 individuals from each group to complete and be prepared to answer when they come back to our meeting at some point, whenever we schedule them. I don't think it looks like a real heavy load, huh?
Could change that to Portland instead of.
yeah, that's the question, that's
Yeah.
where I put, there's Todd, that was what he gave me back on his email when I asked him about what they did there. And that's the process they went through on their end. And he was, as you can read there, he was excited about the results that he got. I believe it says in there that, they didn't necessarily ask him every single question, but it led to a pretty good discussion whenever they just threw a couple of those questions out there, because people would, their thought process would grow from each one of those.
We heard a lot of good ideas, and those that participated were excited about the city listening to the ideas and concerns. So, and that's what we're trying to do right now, and to give the contractor a heads up on what he needs to accomplish, and what kind of a contractor we need in the beginning. So, any other thoughts, comments, before we kind of make a decision here of which way to go?
To get this straight, are we going to, we're gonna give up this?
We're gonna drop a letter and attach it to these questions. And then we'll go to each one of those areas. One letter will go to each area. We will, in that letter, ask them to select 3 people, 4 people, whatever we think, to conduct these interviews. And we'll ask them to, those 3 people that they select will fill out this interview form, and then we will set a date for our meetings, or we will contact them later. We'll break this up so that we have our interviews conducted by us. And that'll be the extent of it. Our participation in the beginning will be just simply writing the letter and getting the question out, getting them to select 3 people, and then we will interview those all, well, however many that is, those 3 people.
Okay, now, when they bring this back, we can ask them very simple question.
Yes. Yeah, we're just gonna have discussion using that as the outline.
Okay. That's all I want to know.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I just want to interject that I don't think we want in writing answers back on this.
No.
We want the discussion end of it back on these questions, and like I said, 2 of those questions might stem things that we never thought of. But in writing, then they're going to get too specific about it. So, supplying them with that, I don't think there's any issue with that. We just don't want them to return in writing, sign it at the bottom, and now this is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have to make it clear that these are just
Some of the
questions
questions,
discussion.
yeah, some of the topics.
Yeah,
We don't want to limit them to this either.
No, we put down there, these are some of the things you might be interested in talking about.
However, the people doing the interview, those 3 people, will probably have to make notes so that they'll be prepared to come and talk to our group.
Right. Because they're probably going to go around and ask questions in each one of their groups. So, also, Mr. Chairman, as the plan develops, we have our consultant on board. It is very, very typical that there is a community survey performed. Some of them do it via the internet, some of them do it via mailing, but there is a community survey performed on a percentage of the community. And they've identified, let's say, in a community of 3,350 people represent the community. Just arbitrarily names out of the phone book, addresses, there you go, you send it out. When you get that much information back, it's just like polls. Sure. You get pretty much identified. You'd never be able to interview every one of them anyhow, or survey every one. But that's coming up. So I don't want anybody to think that John Q. Public isn't going to be part of this. These are to hire the consultant. John Q. Public comes in the master plan development as it's being built.
Okay. All right, so we can assume that we should try to have this complete by June 1st. What do you think? We have a letter out, the individuals selected have their input, and do our interviews by June 1st.
If we did June 1st, the interviews were done, then we'd be doing the RFP in July and interviewing in August, maybe hiring in September. Best case scenario, 1 month. Usually back to the process, very typically you receive 10 consultants that are interested in this. A committee, whatever that committee is going to be, reviews those consultants and shortlists them. And then they have personal interviews with each one of those and decide from that. That's not set in stone. You pick whoever you want, how you want to do it. That's typically how it's done. So we would have to have time for them to put their requests together, get them to us, review them. So maybe we're pushing it.
Yeah, you're
September.
pushing it.
Yeah. So set probably October or something like that for the actual hiring of a consultant.
But the interview the committees, we could say June 1st.
Yeah, I was trying, Mr. Chairman, I was trying to base everything else off of if we ended then where we would be.
Okay, those dates then would go into our little critical path flow chart that we're going to start developing.
And also, those are going to help us decide if that's when we think stakeholders will be done with those interviews, then that's going to identify the information we need for the grant application.
Okay. All right, I'm wondering if it wouldn't be a good idea to schedule another meeting for us to compose this letter and review the list again to make sure we've got everybody, all the major areas covered. I don't think we can do that today. But we can get a consensus from the board that this process is the way we want to go. So we've already developed the stakeholders. We're going to compose a letter to be sent to the stakeholders, asking each one of them to select 3 people from their area. Or do we want to limit the number of people in any way? We just leave it up to them to. Or do we want?
That's your call.
Well, let's say for now that they select three individuals from their area to represent their people. Once that is done, we will then schedule appointments to meet with those 3 folks, and we will consolidate all the information, and all that information will go to Tracy, or you and Tracy, and that then is what is done with that. Does that go with the grant application or no?
No, that application would have already been sent off by then.
Yes, right.
That information would be then taken to identify those specific areas of value that the community has and put those into the RFP. We want an expert that's going to be able to deliver us on this, and this.
Right, okay. All right. Is everybody good with that?
Yeah,
General outline.
yeah, I'm just, we'll get to the particulars later, but I was just wondering if anybody had one, if it would be wise to have at least one meeting someplace long enough for anybody that might have an opinion to give to us outside of these 2. But I mean, like, if you, what I'm getting at is if the city builders, not the builders, but the business association, the big 3, there might be another businessman out there that wants to particularly talk to us.
Right.
And would it be wise? I mean, this is something down the line.
Yeah.
Keep in mind.
No, but I think that's a good question. If someone was missed in the initial interview process, or wasn't represented entirely, we need to give them an opportunity to voice their concerns or their desires. So I think we can handle that.
Mr. Chairman, if you wanted to take that information that you have from your stakeholder interview and have one public meeting at a facility big enough to hold and invite the public, and then, limit, can't go on and on all night long, but does anybody else have anything else they'd like to add? And then anybody from the public could come to that meeting. This is just a suggestion.
Yeah.
And then that could be added to, it had to be done fairly quickly after that, so the RFP could get out and get done.
Yeah, I think the public needs to be involved too, one or 2 meetings, because there's in fact some people are logged in at a certain time, they can't make that meeting. And we need to, knowing how some things work, we need to have an open forum in there someplace, somehow.
We could, Mr. Chairman, we could also put just, a place for them to respond back on our website, could we not? And then you wouldn't even have to do the open meeting, you could just make sure that was publicized and, your opinion, go to the website, fill it out.
But if you talk about the open meeting for the people, I ran across a lot of people that don't have computers, so you need an open meeting.
Mr. Chairman, Board, you will have probably 4 open meetings with the consultant, with John Q. Public, as you move along through that. At least 3 to 4 for interjection. This is where we're at in here. Here's some cookies, here's some coffee. What do you think? Off on boards, where are we heading in the right direction? You get comments, then you go back to the drawing board and go, heading in the wrong direction, looks like, maybe we ought to read. And that happens very typically throughout the process.
What we really need to consider right now is what we're doing is getting the answers to these questions, and consolidating, and getting those to the contractor. So that's our mission, if you will. And down the road, as we go through this whole master planning process, we're going to have lots of opportunities for public meetings. There's lots of.
I feel sorry for you, sir.
With respect to this letter that we're gonna write, rather than get together and try to write that letter, I think we could do it a lot quicker. We just have Ron write the letter and then we just pick it apart.
I think that'd be great.
Well, thanks.
Would you like, you probably have examples of that letter though from other communities.
Yeah, we can do something there.
Okay.
I think it'll move quicker if we do it that way.
Do we want to just incorporate it into our next meeting then?
As long as our next meeting sometime in a couple of years.
Yeah, right. Well, the next meeting we decide